Hello and welcome to Tar Heel Teachers at Home. I'm Marlow Artist. I'm the moderator of the program and proud principal at Craven Early College High School in New Bern. Tar Heel Teachers at Home is an interview series focused on engaging North Carolinians in conversations around education. Each episode, I'm happily joined by a wonderful panel of North Carolina educators, each one representing a particular subsection of education. We'll start our introductions with our elementary school co-host.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Tart, and I'm the assistant principal at Union Elementary School in Sampson County Schools.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalia Mejia. I represent Cabarrus County. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English as a second language at C.C. Griffin STEM Middle School, and I'm North Carolina's 2023 Beginning Teacher of the Year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Xavier Adams. I teach social studies at Orange High School and Orange County Schools. There I teach AP African American Studies, Honors Latin American Studies, and World History. And I am the NCAT 2022 North Carolina Beginning Teacher of the Year.
Hello, everyone. I'm LaShondra Parker, and I am an assistant professor of special education at Fayetteville State University.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us for this panel. We're so excited to have each of you represented tonight. For this special episode of Tar Heel Teachers at Home, we are chatting with Mo Green, candidate for North Carolina State Superintendent. Mo, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
We're so excited to chat with you. You have done so much in education here in North Carolina and contributed in so many different ways. So I do want to start with the million-dollar question. Why are you running for state superintendent?
Thank you so much for that question. So I am running because I'm concerned about the direction of North Carolina public schools. In fact, I believe that we are witnessing a dismantling of our North Carolina public school system. I like to say brick by precious brick. You can look at any number of issues and things that I think would support my thought on that. And it is because of that that I think that there needs to be a strong voice against that dismantlement. And I'm offering myself up to be that voice. Also, I'm running because I do believe that it's important not to just simply raise concerns, but also to set a vision and hope that others will join in that vision and move our district forward. And move the state forward, I should say. And so certainly, looking forward to exploring that in more detail, but that gives you hopefully at least an overview of why I've decided to run.
You certainly have been a visionary throughout your various capacities and various roles that you've had in education. What prompted you to start your career in public education in 2001 with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools?
Yes, sir. So just to give you a little bit of background, I did practice law in a private law firm for a number of years, and that law firm at the time was Smith Helms, Mullis and Moore. I was an associate, and then I became a partner in that law firm. But right when I started as an associate, the law firm had just gotten the engagement to represent the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. And so it's a large law firm, lots of lawyers, and you get assigned to work with certain clients. I got assigned to work with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. And lo and behold, a number of years later, I had the wonderful opportunity to become its general counsel and jumped on that opportunity. And so that's what got me into actually working directly with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. But I had actually done it for a number of years, even prior to becoming an employee of that school system.
And then throughout
certainly then why, I mean, so sort of as part of that then is what really drew me to work with that particular client, if you will, after being so assigned. It was and remains the type of organization that just spoke to me. You are trying to improve the lives of so many young people and have them become who they are really destined to be. through the power of education. And so, it was a kind of client that I said, I'd love to be a part of that. Also was very interested in, what thought I was seeing, which was a lot of good work being done, but maybe also instances where young people were not revealing how intelligent they were on various examinations, and wanted to figure out what could I do as the lawyer to sort of help with that. And so was very, very engaged in the work of the school system. And then, as I say, got the opportunity to actually become its general counsel. And that just, one thing led to the next. But each time it was just one of the clients that I really enjoyed working for and with.
And so then how did you make that transition to Guilford? So you were promoted to Chief Operating Officer for CMS and then became Deputy Superintendent. When did you realize that you wanted to be a superintendent?
Yes, sir. So, again, a little bit of context. It was really never my intention to move into school district administration. I thought I would be a lawyer for my entire career. I thought I might do different types of law. So, might at some point become a general counsel for an organization, might maybe even become a law professor or a judge, but do things that were related to continuing to be engaged in the practice of law, or certainly surrounded by legal matters in that way. It was actually a superintendent who was just being hired to be the superintendent, Dr. Peter Gorman, who, as he was going through the process of being interviewed and then ultimately selected, I actually was the staff person that managed the search process and worked with the Board of Education on that, and got to meet him, and and we engaged just a little bit, and then he asked me to become his number two, to run the day-to-day operations of the school system, which started off as chief operating officer and ultimately became deputy superintendent. And I give you that context because it was also then Dr. Gorman who said, Mo, you need to be a superintendent, and I know where you ought to be a superintendent. And
Wow.
it was, and so it was Guilford County Schools. And I said, gosh, I'm not sure about that. I'm not. I mean, you sort of convinced me to sort of shift hats and move from practicing law to doing school district administration, and now you're telling me I should be a superintendent. But I very much valued his opinion, and ultimately decided to do that. And was blessed to be able to be selected to do that. So the law had only changed, I don't know, a few years or so prior to that, to allow someone who did not have sort of that educational background, did not have the license to be a superintendent, to become a superintendent in the state of North Carolina. And I've been told that I'm certainly, if not the first, one of the first, non-traditional, if you will, superintendents. But that's the context. And it was, again, as I sort of thought about what he was sharing with me, a strong desire to see if there are ways that I could continue to work with students, work with the boards, work with educators to improve the lives of students. And it even as a lawyer was compelling. So certainly even in school district administration and CMS, and as this opportunity to sort of try to do and lead an organization was very, very compelling to me as well.
And so many things were accomplished during your time with Guilford County Schools, and we will unpack that. And before I turn it over to the panel, what prompted you then to make the transition from Guilford County Schools to the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation?
Yes, sir. So a little bit of background about Z. Smith Reynolds, because I think it'll add a bit of context as to why I decided to make that shift. So the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation was and is a North Carolina based foundation that solely focuses on North Carolina. And it tries to accomplish charitable works for the state of North Carolina. I was generally aware of the foundation while I was in other roles, and knew that it had done some pretty significant work in supporting issues that I was very much engaged with and supportive of. And this idea then that you could really try to be supportive of some important issues at a statewide level really spoke to me. One of the major focus areas for the foundation prior to me coming there, and certainly continuing while I was there, was and is focused on public education. And so, again, sort of spoke to me that, gosh, this would be yet another really incredible way to be supportive of public education, of students and educators that are in our public school system. And so, and, you know, after having been in situations where I had to ask for money all the time, it was certainly very nice to be in a situation where we would be providing grants and awards to organizations that were doing tremendous work. So that was also an attractive thing to me as well.
So you definitely come to this campaign from multiple perspectives based on the many hats that you have been able to wear over the years. What questions do we have for Mo Green, candidate for North Carolina State Superintendent?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna forgive you for being a Duke fan. We're still on good terms.
Okay, all right.
One thing that really stood out in an interview that I read that you did was your thoughts on letters training for elementary education. And I know that personally for myself and my teachers in my building, it's a great training, but it's a very big strain on them. So what are your plans on kind of revamping how we roll out statewide implementation of professional development and making sure that teachers are compensated and that it's done in a timely, reasonable manner?
Yeah, so thank you so much for your question. And it sounds to me, first of all, like you are not a Duke fan. So, you know, we will have to work on that a little bit. Yeah, if not tonight, at some other point. Second, your question certainly, it's always the thing that I want to start off with is it's always easy to be on the outside looking in and say, okay, this is a way to change and improve a particular implementation. That, you know, until you're actually on the inside and understand all of the levers that have to be moved when you're trying to do something that substantial, I think it's always a bit misguided to be one that will over criticize, if you will, a particular implementation. So with that then as context, the things that I will lift up are the following. You know, we have, and this is going to be perhaps something that will come through in maybe a number of our questions or my responses to a number of your questions, and that is that I believe that we are woefully underfunding public education. And so it shows up then in things like, you know, paying teachers for professional development. And it shows up then in how we roll out pretty substantial statewide, you know, efforts around professional development and calling on local districts to perhaps also have to provide some resources for it as well. And so that would be something that I would want to lift up, you know, in you know, a way of trying to implement things that are statewide, is that we also need to be thinking about how do we compensate our educators who are going through those professional development activities. Yeah, so yeah, the other thing that I would, you know, certainly sort of lift up is, again, it's real easy to talk about timeline and process. And, you know, the one thing that's always a bit challenging is we are dealing with the education of our children. And we know that if there's something that is really going to be impactful We always want to try to do it as quickly as possible. And I lean on that side, but also recognize that when you do that, you can actually ultimately do harm to students and educators because you can push things too quickly and too soon. And so I think that even as there's that sense of urgency, because our children will only go through the educational system one time, we have got to do it in a way that makes sense long term as well. And so, again, one of the things that I would be looking at is, what does that timeline look like, and how do we implement it in a way that doesn't sort of overwhelm, in this case, teachers, to the point where they're sort of burnt out and not really appreciating what's being offered to them. So that would be something that I would be paying very, very close attention to as part of an implementation. Is you want to be urgent, but you also want to do things in a way that will make sense both in the short term and medium term and long term as well. So I hope that gives you some sense of how I think about implementations in general without trying to be overly critical about an implementation of letters training in this particular instance.
I agree. Thank you. I mean, it is a very valuable training. One thing that has concerned me with it, and I've heard a lot of other teachers, is how different districts are taking the implementation of letters, particularly how teachers are compensated. So when you look at the districts around Sampson County, you have some districts, and again, all teachers are doing the same work, but some districts are offering $1,000 stipends where the county next door might not be offering any supplement at all. So how do you think we can work to kind of even the playing field and make sure that every district is doing the same so that you don't have such an imbalance between compensation for the same amount of work?
Yeah. So again, one thing that I would be thinking about is this is intended to be a statewide implementation. And so we ought to be thinking about this from a statewide level. So the resources then for this implementation, I think, and compensation for educators should be coming from the state. Now, one thing that it's always going to be a bit challenging because what I would say is there should be at least that minimum level that's coming from the state. What's always going to be a bit challenging is that local districts will understand their local context and understand what additional resources they may want to provide to educators. And so I'm not going to be able to suggest to you that it's going to be perfectly uniform across the state. But I would hope that we could develop a system in working with the superintendents across the state, come to some agreement as to at least we're going to have this minimum level, and that the state would provide that, and then local districts hopefully would try to stay within that range, or recognize that that if they go outside of that, they're actually then potentially causing challenges for their brethren and sisters, if you will, in surrounding districts. So that's the kind of conversation I would have with superintendents across the state.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Mo, really appreciate you taking the opportunity to meet with us. Um, I think in the upcoming months, as people continue to think about, and even the weeks with the primaries about who they want to vote for, we're going to hear a lot of different narratives around what people think is best for kids, specifically in this role of superintendent. And so I'm curious, what do you think are the needs of our students in this moment right now of public education?
Thank you for that question. So, first of all, I do believe that there has to be a pretty clear vision of what we want for our public education. system in North Carolina. And then the question is, how do you go about that? Which will get then to the needs, I think, of our students. And so for me, I have really leaned into a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. And also lean into this desire to be excellent in all that we do in a public school system. And so those two pillars, if you will, the quote from Dr. King really speaks to where I think we ought to be going and what I think kids need, which is to increase certainly their knowledge. They ought to acquire information at exceptional levels as they proceed through educational system. But we also ought to be developing their character. And I do believe that that is something that has to be intentional as students learn, how to comport themselves and learn what's important in their lives beyond just knowledge acquisition. The striving for excellence then is perhaps just a way that I am, put together, which is that if we're going to do anything, we should not be settling to do it sort of just in an average fashion. We ought to strive to be the absolute best. And so I believe we ought to be striving to be the best school system in the entire country. That would be excellence. And there are many different ways one could suggest how you get there or what that begins to look like. But I will tell you that it begins to set a framework that's different than the one that I think we have. I also believe that kids then sort of, they will lean into what they see. And they will rise to the levels that we set for them. And so if they see that we're striving for excellence and nothing short of that, then that's where I think they will go towards. So how do we get there? And then this gets to then what I think kids need in this moment in time. So I certainly believe we've got to have full funding of public education. And by that, I mean to suggest that we look at, for example, the Leandro litigation and lots of evidence that there are billions of additional dollars due into our public education system. And that we ought to do that before we start providing significant resources for things like a private school voucher program. Second, I think that what we need to do is be sure that we revere educators. And so I use that term because I want to be sure that people understand how critically important I think educators are. And so this is a noble profession, one that must be seen that way. So I don't use respect. I try to find a word that's even higher than that. And when I'm talking educators, let me be really clear that I'm talking well beyond just teachers. So I'm talking about bus drivers and cafeteria workers and custodians, all of the folks who really have a part to play in the education of our students. Third, I think that students need to have differentiated resources made available to them. Now, we do that certainly in public schools already, but I think that if we had more funding, we would be able to do even more of that in ways that I think are really helpful and gets to what our kids need. For example, we need to have many more sort of counselors and social workers working in our schools. Because one of the things that I think our kids need at this moment in time is support from adults that understand the challenges that many of our young people are facing. And it can work with them, can work with other adults, can work with families to get them to a place that they can indeed be ready for and do well in classrooms. So certainly also think we've got to have safe and secure learning environments. I mean, we find ourselves in an era where, just in general, but certainly even in schools, we find ourselves in places where children don't feel safe oftentimes because of a lot of external issues as well as issues inside schools. And so trying to be sure that we focus on those things with a number of different strategies. Again, those mental health professionals, I think, are going to be critically important in this regard as well. So that's important. I also think, so public education is about community. And one thing that I think we need to continue to enhance is going to be community involvement in our schools. There are so many ways that I think our communities can be involved and supportive of our kids, and we've got to be sure that they're being brought in, along with our parents, being sure that they understand the important role that they play. And then finally, I do believe that we have to celebrate the good in public education. So what kids need to see and understand is there are a lot of great things happening in and around them, that there are folks who are doing amazing work on their behalf. And when they see that, I think, again, they will lean in and do even better than they are already currently doing. And so those are things that I think, again, having that strong vision, along with pillars that I've laid out, will get our kids to where I think what they need, and where I think they can go if given those sorts of supports, if you will.
Thank you for that answer. And as a follow-up, looking back on your career, what is one of the proudest accomplishments that you have done in terms of addressing student needs?
Yeah, thank you. I'm always hesitant to talk about accomplishments as though they are mine. So I am so pleased that, when I was superintendent of Guilford County, the school system, the 10,000 employees, the 70-something thousand students, the community that surrounded those students, the parents that surrounded those kids, that they did some amazing work. And so, to be, we used exactly the same quote there, and we also strove for excellence. So we used a quote from Dr. King: "Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education." And so, and we strove for excellence. And so to see things like, our graduation rate jumped pretty substantially to almost 90%. By the time I left, it's now over 90%. To see that, 37% of our students who are graduated with having taken and passed a college level course or examination like a AP, Advanced Placement, or International Baccalaureate exam. And when I say passed, sort of scored well enough that most colleges would take that exam score and give the students credit for it. To see those kind of metrics, along with the fact that Guilford County Schools was recognized as a national district of character, one of 3 so recognized, because of all of the tremendous work that was done to really say we're going to make that equally as important as academic outcomes. Those are things that I'm proud of others for doing all of that. It's not my accomplishment, but it's the accomplishment of others that I always like to to lift up, if you will.
Thank you, Mo. I think I'll jump in now. I was loving all the things that you were saying in that first answer, because it was leading me to exceptional children, right? That's my background and my love. And so my question is, have you given thought, and I'm sure you have, to any types of programs or initiatives that you can develop, or talk with districts across the state about to further enhance the progress of students with special needs? And everything that you were saying prior, it touches on all our babies. I love to call them my babies, because my job is making sure that all students, being inclusive, are making adequate progress. So what are your thoughts about programs and initiatives for students with special needs?
Great. Thank you so much for that question. So I'm actually going to start maybe in a way that may be a little bit different than talking about programs that focus on students with special needs, because I want us to be sure that we examine who we identify as students with special needs first. So I believe that we are in a situation where we may be over-identifying students that are identified as special needs, having special needs. Well, let me say this. In the sense that if we're going to talk about special needs and we want to talk about the broad spectrum of special needs, then there are students who may have learning, impairments and things of that nature that we want to focus on. But special needs can also include kids who are academically or intellectually gifted as well. And so when I say we're over identifying, I guess I was first talking about those students that may have some learning impairments that need to be addressed. I actually believe that we are, in many ways, over identifying a lot of those students, particularly students of color. And so one of the things that I want us to focus on initially is to be sure that we are doing a much better job of identifying students that have special needs, as opposed to identifying students that perhaps we are not doing enough of a job of educating in regular classroom settings, and we want to suggest that perhaps there's something wrong with the child. It may, in fact, be us as adults that need some addressing. So the flip side of that then is I actually think we're under identifying certain students with special needs that are on the academically and intellectually gifted side of the ledger. Again, I'll look at students of color. Where you will see there's large disparities between Black and brown kids versus white kids being so identified. And you're just never going to convince me that there is that disparity that exists in reality. So it suggests to me that there is something else that we're not doing that's preventing students of color to be appropriately and accurately identified as well. And so I want to address those issues as well. Now, on both ends, we certainly tried to address both things when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, and certainly did, I think, some important work there that we'll want to continue to focus on. So that's where I want to. So I start perhaps in a different place and say, okay, let's jump right into the students who have special needs. Now, once we get to the students who do have, who are appropriately identified, and now I'm talking about those that may have some learning challenges that not allowing them to access the curriculum as well as other students can. Certainly I'm open to hearing what others might say. I have found that For example, even the program, the letters program, I have found that there are other programs that can work well for a lot of these students. And so we'll want to lean in and be sure that we are providing access for those students to those opportunities as well. Certainly, so if there are other programs, one of the things that you'll hear from me, and so would love to have a follow-up conversation, but you'll hear from me that I like to listen and learn. And so if there are programs that are out there that have some evidence of success, I'm open to hearing about them and seeing if they can be things that we will bring into North Carolina as
well. Okay, thank you for that. And so
Mhm.
now I want to look at or carry it into a different direction just a little bit. So along the lines of our students with special needs, I guess my question would be, how could you, or what types of things would you discuss with districts across the state as far as more training for the SPED teachers, and then trying to get more like teacher assistants or others to step into the field to work with those students?
Yeah. So, first of all, again, this is what I said earlier. Sometimes it's going to feel like it's a little bit of a broken record, but I do feel like, we have to have significant additional resources provided into our schools. And one of the places where I think we need to have additional resources provided is working with students with special needs. And I think that a number of things need to happen in that regard. One of which is I do believe that in order for the educators who are so trained to do and work with special needs students not be overwhelmed with the number of students that they have to work with without having additional supports in the classroom. And so assistance, I think, would be critically important. Adding additional assistance would be, critically important. Providing, yes, So one of the things that happened, certainly happened when I was superintendent, because I started right there at the time of the Great Recession. You try to find places to cut if you can, without directly impacting the employment of individuals. And so one of the places that gets cut is around professional development. And so it was already woefully underfunded, and so it's even in a much more dire situation as well. And so that's where again I would be trying to push for additional resources to be funneled back into professional development activities. So as far as recruiting, educators into the field of special education, so this is, first of all, we need to fully appreciate that we are struggling with getting folks into education, public education, period. So then it's even more challenging, if you're talking about certain sort of particular areas to include special education. And so part of what we've got to do is part of what I was lifting up before, where it is a need for additional resources. I mean, we have to pay our people more. We have to pay our educators more. We have to pay our teachers more. And we want to suggest that that's not, or as it is, it's a non-starter if we're not sort of recognizing that folks really are interested in how much compensation I'm going to be making and what am I going to be able to bring home at the end of the day. And so we have to start there. I also believe that we've got to recognize that there are certain fields that it is more challenging to bring people into. And so we have got to then figure out how to get additional compensation in for those folks in those fields to make it more attractive for them to come into those fields. I think it's a mistake to rely solely on, well, folk just love kids and want to work with kids, and so they'll come. Yes, that will happen, but not in the numbers and in a manner that it should, number one. And then two, I think it undervalues the importance of having, highly qualified individuals working with our kids, because those folk are making an intentional decision not to even come into our field, given the level of compensation that we're providing.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Mo.
Hello.
So for my question, you painted a very vivid picture of the dismantling of our education system when you started talking. And today, the Parents' Rights Bill, the Leandro case, and school choice have really become contentious issues in North Carolina. How do you see yourself as superintendent navigating those conversations with all the stakeholders?
Yeah. So, the first thing that I will attempt to do is to approach those issues the way I approach other things. And I said earlier that I like to listen first. And so part of the way that I think people, for example, in Guilford County leaned in and wanted to do certain things was because I first listened. And so part of what I want to do is listen to what are the issues that people are really sort of lifting up, because oftentimes at the bottom, at the core of, you know, when you really explore what the issues are, they turn out not to be things that should manifest themselves into the development of things like a parent bill of rights. But it turns that's what happens when I think people feel like they haven't been listened to and approach with a level of, let's figure out what really is going on here. Let's bring lots of folks into the room to have the kind of conversations that will lead us to what really will be beneficial for our children. Now, having said that, I also believe the following. There are going to be times when you have to say enough already. And this isn't the way to go forward as a school system. Yeah, and so I'll just use an example of when I said that when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools. So there was a time when the General Assembly wanted to eliminate career status for teachers, tenure, if you will, for teachers, and wanted to do that for those who had already earned tenure, as well as those who had not yet earned it. And I said, along with, so there was a lawsuit that was brought, a declaratory judgment, after we had the conversations with the General Assembly. We could not get them on board with saying this was not right for those who had already earned it. We brought a lawsuit that was brought by the Guilford County Board of Education, the Durham County Board of Education, and me as an individually named plaintiff to say this isn't right. And people have earned this property right, and you can't just simply take it away from them. And so the same thing then is going to be true. So for things like the expansion of the voucher program, I want to lean in and hear what is it that folks are really sort of raising as concerns, and see if there aren't ways that we cannot address those in our existing public education system, really sort of lifting up what what we do and what we can do, where there's opportunities for improvement, perhaps, but really lean into that. But then also reach a point where you say, this is not going to work. And with regards to the voucher program, we've reached that point where, we are woefully underfunding public education. I mean, to the tune of billions of dollars. This is not the time to be expanding a private school voucher program. And then suggesting somehow or another that kids are going to get a better education, somewhere else. And expanding it to a place where anyone can get a voucher, including those who've already made their fine decision to send their child to a private school when they can afford to do so. They do not need government assistance to send their child to a private school. They can afford to pay the $30,000 to do so. They've made that decision. Bless them for making that decision. But those thousands of dollars that now are going to go to support their child to go there needs to be in our public school system. And so we have got to have the kind of conversation that brings that turns that around. Part of the way that that's got to happen, I believe, is it cannot be just Mo Green. Nor can it be Mo Green and wonderful educators. It actually has to be, again, the entire community. In this instance, I'm talking about faith community. I'm talking about business community. I'm talking about students. I'm talking about all of us saying, guys, this is not the way forward, particularly if we want to be sure that we're going to strive to have the best educational system in the entire country. So that's how I have operated and how I would intend to operate.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your response.
Yeah, thank you.
So Mo, we do have a couple of students who are joining us for this conversation. And so our first question is from Claudia.
Hello, I'm Claudia Rivera Baroa, and I'm a freshman at Craven Early College High School. My first question was regarding the pillars on your website, Mr. Green. One of your pillars talks about preparing students for their next phase in life. Can you please specify which phase of life you are referring to and how it differs for individuals planning to embark on different paths, such as college or entering the workforce directly after high school? And how would you accomplish this goal of preparing them?
Great, thank you. And great to see you this evening. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. And thank you for reviewing my pillars. I'm very impressed by that. So when I'm talking about the next, I'm talking about the next after high school in this instance. So, and preparing students for the next, really in my mind, means not shutting any doors before young people make a decision that they want to not go a particular way. So when a student graduates from high school, I want that student to not only have a high school diploma and have done well in their coursework to earn that diploma, but also have evidence that they're ready for their next in any sort of different way. So that's where, for me, it was important that we, for example, in Guilford County Schools, had metrics that not only looked at graduating from high school, but also taking and passing a college level course or an AP exam or an IB exam, if those students then want to go to college. But we also had that we wanted to increase the number of students that were also taking and doing well with what we called completers, career and technical education completers. So I wanted students to also be able to say, yeah, but no, at this point, after high school, I might not be interested in going immediately to college or to a four-year college. I really want to really go and work on a trade. And so I've done that also. I've been exposed to and done well in that in high school. And I want students to also then be involved in activities, co-curricular activities like music or art or things of that nature, and really explore that as well, so that being prepared for the next is everything is still open to that student when they graduate from high school. Nothing has been shut off. The student will make a decision as to what they want to do next, but nothing, we as the educational system haven't shut that off. If that makes, hopefully that makes sense to you. And so that's how I would propose that we go about it, in the state as well. That I want to be sure that the diploma means certainly they've completed a particular set of coursework, but also that there's evidence to suggest that they are actually indeed ready for the next in whatever they want to do, and we've not shut off any path to them before they decide to choose a particular path.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Claudio. And our last question is from Zed.
Good evening, Mr. Green. My name is Zara Walden. I am currently a junior at Craven Early College High School. My question has to do with your pillar concerning revering educators. My question for you is, can you further explain on how you plan on taking an innovative approach to tackling the North Carolina teacher shortage issue, especially within those districts with disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds?
Great, thank you. Thank you for lifting that up. And so, and thank you also for reviewing the pillars as well. Again, quite impressive. Yeah, the Revering Educators pillar has a number of things that are sort of in that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to unpack it. First and foremost, if we're going to try to increase the number of educators, we have got to be sure that we start with understanding that we've got to pay teachers substantially more than they're currently paid. So North Carolina finds itself, I've said 42nd in the country with regards to beginning teacher pay. The governor a week or so ago said 46th. So in any event, we're on the lower tier of what we are paying. We cannot continue to do that. We have got to increase the compensation for educators. I think there are other things that we can do that are compensation related that will also potentially attract educators into certain of our communities. So things like having housing allowances provided for teachers, or housing period provided for teachers, or certainly reduced costs for housing for teachers. I think there are things that different communities might be able to do that turns out to be sort of like compensation, that being one. There can certainly be others. I can imagine communities doing really creative things around resourcing for food, for example, that can provide ways that, as we're trying as a state to increase compensation, teachers will be able to take advantage of additional resources that will allow for the dollars that they're currently getting to go a bit further, if you will. I certainly also think that we have got to do things that ensure that teachers have the kind of working conditions that will want them to continue to be, first of all, attracted to, and then want to continue to work within our schools. And by that, so I'll start with, for example, the leadership in a school building. The one thing that I learned pretty rapidly is that teachers will want to go work for certain leaders and will want to stay and work with certain leaders, and conversely will find the quickest way out when they're leaders that are not really appreciating the skills and talents that they bring. So part of what we've got to do is be sure that we are recruiting, training, and employing excellent leaders for each of our schools. So I also think that we have got to, and one of the things that I have begun to sort of float, I certainly want to do a lot more conversation and research and thought around this is, talking with our colleges and universities in North Carolina, and I'd like to start perhaps with our historically Black colleges and universities, where we suggest that, if not a mandate, certainly a strong encouragement that students graduate with not only their college degree in whatever area that they get it in, but also that they also obtain a teacher license. And that we begin to suggest to them that this is a place for them to consider working, because I've always believed that if I can get you in the door, I can find a way to keep you there. If we have strong leaders, have good sort of working conditions, if we can increase the compensation, we can do that. We can get more folks into the teaching profession. And then finally, I will lift up that I think there's a lot in the atmosphere that we need to be sure that we're also addressing as well. And so that's why I use the term revere educators. We have diminished this profession. And when I say we, I'm talking about the broader community. The way that we think about educators, we almost treat them as not worthy, and I think that is a significant challenge that we've got to overcome, and so you got to change the atmosphere, I believe, along with doing all these other things, so that folk, it's one thing that people, I mean, everyone is, I think, we want to be places where people will appreciate us. And if we have atmosphere that suggests that no one is going to appreciate, very few folks are going to appreciate us, then we may not want to stay there or even go there. And so we've got to begin to change that. And I believe it begins to change, starting with the way we even talk about educators and the way we treat them. So those would be the things that I would focus on at this point.
Thank you, Zed. And Amy has one final pressing question.
Okay.
Mo, you've brought up such great points that I think as educators and students and people involved in the educational community, we know that these are pressing issues, that they have to be addressed and they have to be changed. But I think outside of the realm of educators, there's so many people that are uneducated about what needs to change. And so many people go to the voting booths and they just vote straight ticket and see state superintendent as one that they don't really research as much as they should. My husband, for example, who's like, I don't know who to vote for that. So what do you say to the people outside of education that when they go to the ballots, when they go to vote, why they should research and really think about who they're voting for when it comes to this incredibly important role?
Great. Thank you. So what I would say to folk is, first of all, to fully appreciate how significant this position is, in that this position oversees the public school system of North Carolina, which is 1.3 million students. It also oversees a huge department, the Department of Public Instruction, that administers approximately $11 billion annually. It sets the course of study and the assessments and the accountability models. And so, some version of that, I think, is going to be important for folks to sort of understand the magnitude of this role. The second thing, because because part of what I think some people are really challenged with is they don't really even appreciate sort of the magnitude of the role, and so think, well, anyone who might sign up to run for it can actually accomplish the role. The second thing is that this role, and it's codified in the legislation related to it, that it is the one that is supposed to identify the challenges and needs of the public school system. And so it is, I think, designed to be someone who is an advocate for public schools and what is needed to improve and enhance public schools. And so again, I think you got to have someone who is going to be deeply invested in public education. Yeah, so there are going to be folk who I think as they're thinking about this role are going to be sort of maybe not fully invested in public education and the needs of public education. And as a result, then are not going to be the best advocates for, this particular position. And so, certainly I don't want to say that. I mean, there are plenty of folk who certainly are qualified to do this role. I don't want to suggest I'm the only one. I have had the kind of experiences that addresses the magnitude of the position, having run, the third largest district in the state, having been the deputy superintendent and the attorney for one of the two largest districts in the state, having run a foundation that pours money, having done things like be on boards and run organizations that focus on arts and homelessness students and policy and media and community support and athletics. I was the president of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I mean, so these are the sorts of things that I think as people are thinking about it, ought to be thinking about. And then, I would say, probably look to those others and see who has endorsed. So those who probably know what this role is more, has a better sense of it, sort of who's lining up. And so I'll just, again, lift up, you've got Governor Hunt in Purdue, North Carolina Association of Educators, the AFL-CIO, other superintendents, former and retired superintendents, June Atkinson, who's a former state superintendent. Even young people like the Young Democrats of North Carolina, are lining up to say Mo Green is the guy that, African American Political Action Committee. I mean, we've been blessed. I mean, we've been blessed with lots of folks who want to be supportive and endorse me. But that's what I would share. I guess one last thing, I'll just say this. I'm not sure, quite honestly, that this role should be as political as it has turned out to be. I'm not sure public education should be as political as it's turned out to be. And so I do find that is, if I were sort of stepping back as well as, so who is going to, in the midst of what has turned out to be this hugely political world of public education, who is going to taper that down a bit and be sure that we actually educate our children to the best and highest levels that they can. And so that's part of what I would also be suggesting to your husband and others as they think about who to pick for this important role.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mo, we certainly appreciate you joining us for this rich conversation, and you certainly will have to come back because we have so much more that we can talk about.
I would love to come back. I would love to explore more. Would love to listen and learn. I mean, so part of what is always a bit of a challenge is I've given you my thoughts and opinions, I haven't really heard your thoughts and opinions. And to me, that is in if you know me, I mean, you've heard folks talk. I mean, we branded it. Mo wants to know. That is, in fact, the reality. I learned so much more, not from me talking about and saying various things, but actually listening to y'all and listening to others and then figuring out how to move things forward. So I would love to come back and have a conversation where perhaps I did a little bit more listening.
Well, we certainly look forward to our next conversation. We also would like to thank our audience so very much for joining us for this discussion. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so that you will not miss any videos every time that we upload. We also hope that you will like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter at Tar Heel Teachers, and on all of our social media platforms, please use our hashtag Tar Heel Teachers so we can find all of your great comments. We'd like to thank our esteemed panel for joining us for this conversation: Amy Tart, Natalia Mejia, Xavier Adams, and Dr. LaShondra Parker. And once again, we'd like to thank our special students for joining us. Didn't they have some great questions? They are so sharp. I'm just such a lucky principal. And we also like to thank our fantastic guests for joining us: Mo Green, candidate for North Carolina State Superintendent. We look forward to seeing you next time on Tar Heel Teachers at Home.